I am not going to attempt to do a Mr. 2 impression, but I figured I can at least try to pull off his stance. It's not as threatening without the swan attire. I know, Chip, I know. Mommy is not threatening. Yeah, no, you're not. But I love my baby. I'm not threatening, but I love my Chip. Go, baby. Okay, Mr. 2, Bon Clay, Bentham of the Wild. I'll probably go back and forth between what I call him. So, this is obviously the paired video for the Meet Baroque's cover story. Mr. 2 is, I think, pretty much my favorite out of all of the Baroque Works people who are not Robin or Crocodile. I mean, I do like some of the others, but like Mr. 2 is kind of like my favorite besides them. He is a newcomer. He is a former Baroque Works agent. And he is one of the very major antagonists during Alabasta. But he ends up, of course, being an ally. And, you know, the last time that we have seen him, he is an ally. Which we'll get into, you know, when I get to the Impel Down stuff. So a little bit of just miscellaneous stuff. So it's Bentham of the Wild. He is from the East Blue, so he's actually from the same place that a lot of the Straw Hats originate from. But we don't know where exactly he's from in the East Blue. We don't know what island he's from. Could be, I mean, like, I guess technically it could be the Goa Kingdom or Logtown, but it's probably one of the places that we've never been to in the East Blue. We know that Mr. 2 idolizes Ivankov. Fair. That Mr. 2 just idolizes them, which is just funny. And in regards to the Baroque Works name, so Mr. 2 Bon Clay, or Bon Kurei, depending on how you wish to pronounce it, their name, of course, and they themselves are the only pair that is not like a guy and a girl. Man and a woman, the way that the rest of the pairs all are. Like, you know, Mr. Zero and Miss All Sunday, Mr. One and Miss Double Finger, you know, so on and so forth. In this case, Bon Clay is the only one who doesn't have a partner. And that is kind of because of the fact that Mr. 2, that Bon Clay is able to, you know, because of his devil fruit, he's able to go back and forth. And because he's an Okama, he can kind of play the roles of, you know, male and female roles. Also, I think Crocodile was just like, okay, I don't know if I can find a guy or a girl who are willing to put up with this guy's antics for long enough to set up a team. So you're just on your own. He's just going to be on his own. Got that, Robin? Yes, sir. I just have a feeling that gave Crocodile a headache. So, and it is also a reference to the Oban festival, you know, because they'll have like the different holidays or something like that are kind of associated with a lot of the higher ranking ones, like Golden Week or Miss Doublefinger, you know, Miss Valentine's Day, Miss Merry Christmas, all that stuff. So it kind of falls into that setup as well. Bon Clay is 32 years old. He's younger than I am. Side note, I'm kind of trying to figure out if I want to do something, and I'm sure someone has already done this at some point in time, but kind of go through and like all of the One Piece characters that we know, their birthday and the year that they were born, and like essentially make like a card for that and like go through the One Piece timeline for that. I'm kind of trying to figure out if I want to do a video like that, but I haven't fully made that decision. But back to this. Yeah, he's 32 years old, born in the East Blue. He, of course, has the devil fruit, the Mane Mane no Mi, or the clone fruit, which, of course, allows him to, any person that he touches with his right hand, touches their face with his right hand, then he can physically copy them. Just become a perfect copy of them at that point in time. That copy does not change. Like, if he turned into Zoro now, he would still look like Zoro did 2 years ago. He would not have Zoro's, eye that's been, scarred shut and stuff like that. He copied Nami. He wouldn't be able to, have Nami with the long hair and everything. It would still be Nami from her 2 years ago, from her pre-time skip. And he is able to physically copy people, but he cannot copy their strength. And he also is a very good mimic. So he's very good at being able to mimic people's mannerisms and stuff like that very quickly after meeting them, because it also allows him to copy their voice. He cannot copy their memories, but he can copy to a degree their mannerisms, as he's just very good at doing that. And then the other thing in regards to what he has up his sleeve is his battle style, which is Okama Kempo, which is very much his own type of fighting style that he has developed based around ballet and karate and a bunch of other that stuff, ballet and karate and different things like that. And then, so someone asked Oda how this would work, how you could become a master of Okama Kempo. And it's just first, you must master ballet. Then you must learn karate. And third, they work at one of those places. Drag bar? Drag bar, is that what we're talking about here, Oda? I'm not sure. I was at a drag, kind of drag brunch the other weekend. my niece's choir sang it was fun. Had drag queens dancing around. Very fun. But, but this technique that he has does not pair well with his devil fruit. Because he is so used to fighting in his own body, he can't fight while mimicking someone else. And we see this during the fight with Sanji, which I'll get into. But going into Bantham's history. So Bantham, as I said, was born in the East Blue 32 years ago. Don't know what island. At some point in time, he ended up finding the Mane Mane no Mi. Now, we know this devil fruit. We've seen it. Well, we've seen him use it, and then we've also seen it prior in the story being used by Higurashi and Wano, but we know she died because Kaido states that he killed her. And we also know that she dies at some point anyway. She was also really effing old when she was in the story to begin with. So her devil fruit somehow ended up in the East Blue or something along those lines, and Mr. 2 got his hands on it. He also at some point in time has developed his Okama Kempo, so he's done a bunch of that stuff and, decided that was what he was going to be. From there, at some point in time, he is recruited into Baroque Works to work as one of the agents in Operation Utopia and everything else like that. And at some point in time, he, via probably copying other faces, ended up getting his way into Alabasta and copying Cobra's face. As, one of the myriad of faces that is in his retinue that he's able to call upon. I don't think we ever actually get an exact number of what the upper limit is. I would assume there is an upper limit at some point in time, but I don't think Oda ever gave us what that limit number is. Then we get into, the Alabasta arc, or the Alabasta saga. And he's just been, one of the agents, working on causing, distrust and stuff like that between the Alabasta Revolutionary Army led by Koza and Cobra. He's just been, sowing distrust and stuff like that. That's been part of his assignment. Also, he tends to go around, and we know that Mr. 2 is kind of, he's kind of also one of the enforcers. He kind of goes around and will kill some of the agents who have failed, because that's kind of how we're introduced to him, is that shortly after Little Garden, because Mr. 3 gets defeated at Little Garden, he is sent to eliminate Mr. 3, and then also eliminate the Straw Hats. Thankfully, that doesn't go the way that it's supposed to. So what ends up happening is from there is then we get into Drum Island. And this is after Drum Island, because this is after Nami has been taken care of because she's no longer sick. And it's the Straw Hats are on their way from Drum Island to Alabasta. And Luffy and Usopp are just kind of like fishing off the side of the ship, as they tend to do because they get bored, and it's one of the things that keeps them entertained. And they end up pulling up a drowned swan, because via the weather and the Grand Line, Mr. 2 at one point in time had ended up getting knocked off of his ship that he was on and ended up in the water. And because he's a devil fruit user, can't swim. And he thankfully ends up getting saved by the Straw Hats and, saved by Luffy and the others as they are. Yeah. But prior to that, he had ended up in Little Garden, and Mr. 3 was nowhere to be found. So, leading Mr. 2 to fear being killed by Mr. 1, by Dad's bones, because he didn't do what he was supposed to. So, he ordered his men to sail back to Alabasta at top speed and intercept any ships that they encountered. And then he somehow ended up falling into the ocean. Because why the heck not? Yeah. On the way there, that's when he first encounters the Straw Hats. He gets separated from his ship and ends up getting fished up out of the ocean by Luffy and Usopp and Chopper as they are fishing. And then this results in, of course, him getting to meet the Straw Hats. And all the crew are just kind of like, the heck is this guy? And Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper are just like instantly charmed by him and stuff like that with, he shows off his ability to copy their faces, and he copies everybody's face except for Vivi and Sanji. He gets pretty much everybody else's face. And like he goes through and he shows them a bunch of his other faces, and of course one of the ones that Vivi recognizes is of course her father. And then Mr. 2, he also flashes Usopp and Luffy as Nami and then gets beat up by Nami for it. So, fair. Don't do that. So he then, his ship shows up and he dashes off to get back to his ship, and he's headed back off to, he's back with his crew. And this is, Vivi is able to be like, oh no, this is the guy who, he's copied my father's face. This is not good. So that's kind of what happens there. That's how the crew's like, oh no, and that leads to them, of course, putting the X marks on their wrists, so that way they are able to then determine whether or not Mr. 2 is them or not. If, if Mr. 2 is mimicking them, they can determine if it's really him. So we have Mr. 2 kind of to thank for the X, and for the X moment, which I'll get to. For the, the raising their hands in the air to show Vivi the X marks. As they're leaving Alabasta. So he's kind of responsible for both of that, which is kind of nice. Because he's kind of the one who kind of introduces them to like the kind of the concept of Nakama. And so from there, Mr. 2 and his crew, he bids a tearful farewell to the Straw Hats, not realizing they're the Straw Hats. The flag didn't give that away. And then he gets back with his crew, and then they end up getting to Alabasta, where they make their way to the Spider's Cafe, where he is to meet with the other officer agents. While there, he gets into a fight with Mr. 1, which is just funny, because Mr. 1 attacked his subordinates, and Mr. 2 does not like that, because he cares about his subordinates. And from there, they all end up riding, I think it's on the turtle thing, the turtle carriage thing, to Rain Base, to Rain Dinners, where they then have it revealed to them that Mr. Zero himself is none other than Warlord of the Sea, Crocodile. And they're like, ah! Like, oh my god! Type of thing. How did we not know this? Well, that's the point of a secret organization, and code names is that you're not supposed to know. Yeah, boo. I got a cute baby chip. You're my cute chipper boo. You sure? You are the baby and I love boo. I got a chipper boo. He the boo. Bee boo. I know. But I gotta keep recording. Okay. That long interruption. So they get to Rain Taylor's reveal that, oh my god, Crocodile is Mr. One. And then Crocodile essentially like gives them the rest of their instructions for what they are supposed to do for essentially the rest of the arc while he is finishing up Operation Utopia. So he gives them he gives them their instructions, and then they burn them after they've read them. So nobody can get them. Plus, it gets a great scene of like, okay, everybody touch the fire. Okay. From there, they all end up heading off into the different directions that they are supposed to be with. And for a little bit, Mr. Two is kind of paired up with Mr. One and Miss Doublefinger. And they go to Nanohana first, where Mr. Two is disguised as Cobra. And he claims that he has stolen the country's rain and plans to destroy the harbor in Nanohana. And of course, this results in him being confronted by Koza, who of course has Mr. Two's subordinates disguised as the Alabasta military shoot Koza, and then they destroy the harbor, set it on fire, and all this other stuff. He then heads to Alabarna with Mr. One and Miss Doublefinger. He also ends up getting seen by the little kid who like then gets beaten up by Mr. One because he saw Mr. Two as Cobra. So not the best. So we get that. Then we get to the point where it is time for all of the Straw Hats and Vivi and such to arrive at Alabarna. And they're like, okay, so the plan is that the different Baroque's members are watching the different gates, so that way they can keep an eye out for when Vivi and the group get there, and that way they can try to intercept them. Mr. Two is at the west gate, and they discuss their plan in regards to how to deal with the Straw Hats. At that point, the Straw Hats with the super spot build duck troops, or the supersonic ducks, show up, and they are rushing toward Alabasta, and Mr. Two chases after Usopp at first, thinking that it's Vivi because it's him and Matsuge, Eyelashes the camel. And they are, he easily defeats Usopp within 2 seconds, steals Usopp's sniper goggles, and then he heads to go off and try to trick Vivi. Now, they have been informed at the very least, the Baroque Works agents have been informed at the very least that these Straw Hats all have like bandages wrapped around their wrist. And so he's wrapped a bandage around his wrist and he is pretending to be Usopp. He shows up to Vivi and Karu, and Karu has been unfortunately badly injured in like the stampede that happened where Vivi was trying to get to Koza. And Karu gets badly injured there. So what ends up happening is, I know, this is very riveting for you, isn't it? And he's like, I don't know. I'm a dog. Yeah. And what ends up happening is Mr. Two, disguised as Usopp, gets to Vivi and tries to convince her that, convince her that he's the real Usopp and convince her that to like leave Karu and come with him. Vivi knows that Usopp and Karu get along very well, and that Usopp would never say that about Karu. So she's like, show me your wrist. And he holds up the wrist and it's got the bandage on it. And she was like, what's underneath it? And he like takes it off and like there's no mark there, so she knows that it's not him, that it's not actually Usopp, so she figures out that it's Mr. Two. Thankfully, she is able to run with Karu. She's able to get on Karu, who is recovered enough, and they're able to get away, or get, with Mr. Two following them. They end up getting chased to part of the cliffside where Karu fell. Thankfully, Sanji and the Ducks Cowboy and Ivan 10 or Ivan X intercept Mr. Two, allowing Vivi and Karu to get away. So now it is Sanji versus Mr. Two. And this gets into kind of, one of the fun battles. It kind of is like a way of testing Sanji a little bit. Plus, we kind of get to see what Mr. Two is capable of a little bit more. So this results in their battle. And of course, this is where, Mr. Two is, he's trying to mimic the other members of the Straw Hats to try to see if, like, oh, well, there's no way Sanji would ever attack his own crew. So he, like, turns into, I think he tries Usopp and Sanji, or, like, Usopp and Zoro and Luffy. And, like, Sanji is perfectly fine with kicking every single one of them because he's done it before. Has no qualms with kicking them. And then he turns into Nami and he realizes that Sanji cannot attack Nami. So he keeps turning into Nami and is able to use that in order to allow him to, drive Sanji into a fanboyish frenzy by acting like Nami and being very flirty with Sanji, because Sanji brain cannot determine the difference, which I'm like, I do love you, Sanji, but you really need to be better at that. We'll see what the live action does with that. But so what ends up happening is, of course, they're fighting, and eventually, it kind of keeps escalating a little bit. Like, this is all happening while everything else is going on in Alabasta, with the other various fights and everything. But what ends up happening is, Sanji realizes that Mr. Two always reverts back to his normal form, his regular form, when he's about to unleash any of his stronger attacks beyond just, like, some of the basic kicks and everything. So Sanji takes advantage of this, knowing that Bon Clay has to return back to his normal form, so he's not actually in his mind hitting Nami. So this results in them finally getting to that point where they're able to fight a little more fairly. At this point in time, Mr. Two pulls out his iron-tipped swans from his shoulders and put them on his shoes to, like, increase his kicking ability and his range. And then, of course, this just is more battling back and forth with him and Sanji, with more kicks. I kind of like that they both fight with kicks, so it's, like, kind of fun that way. And this, of course, just creates more problems for Sanji. And, just it makes things worse a little bit for Sanji. But eventually what ends up happening is Sanji is able to finally overcome Mr. Two, and he does manage to defeat him. And Mr. Two kind of has this moment where it's just like he could have changed into Nami to try to prevent Sanji from attacking him, but, he's like, I'd rather die as myself than as anybody else type of a thing. I'll be defeated as myself than as anybody else. And Sanji and him kind of come to a bit of an understanding at that point in time. And, he's like, okay, thanks him for a good fight. And then, Sanji kind of, takes his hand. And then Sanji then kicks him in the head again and then takes back Usopp's goggles, which is funny. At some point in time, after the majority of the events, the climax of the arc in Alabasta has finished with the battle and everything, Mr. Two had managed to escape from Alubarna, whereas most of the other, Mr. One and Crocodile was captured. Robin managed to slip away, but Mr. One and Miss Doublefinger and the rest of them had all managed to be captured by the Marines at that point in time. By, Smoker and Hina and their group. So what ends up happening is Mr. Two had managed to escape, and he has made his way to where the Straw Hat ship is, where the Going Merry is. Hidden off part of the, in one of the, like, the little rivers and such in Alabasta off the coast. And he calls the Straw Hats and tells him that he has their ship and that they need to come and get it and everything before the Marines get it, that he hid it from the Marines. This is, of course, the Straw Hats leave the palace. They get to where he is with the ship, and, he, and they're like, Usopp, Luffy, and, Chopper are, like, happy to see him. The others are kind of like, okay, I guess we have to put up with him for a moment. He did help us. He did protect our ship and warn us about the Marines. Okay, that's fair. And he, like, he's happy that he actually gets to be friends with them. And then he also says that he is no longer a member of Baroque Work, so he's no longer Crocodile's pawn. And he wanted to be close friends with them, and perhaps even a shipmate, a crewmate. So I like that kind of got left open there, and I feel like, given what happens in Impel Down, Luffy would be more than happy to have him as a crewmate. I don't know how many of the other Straw Hats would be okay with this, but, if they ever found out what Mr. Two did for him in Impel Down, they would be like, okay, yeah, no, he can stay. He's fine. He can stay. Yeah. Sanji, do not turn into Robin or Nami or any other girls, or I will beat you up again. But so what ends up happening is, the Straw Hats get on their ship and they're heading off, and Mr. 2 is kind of watching as, like, Hina and her group show up with Django and Full Body, and they start to attack. So, Mr. 2, his crew shows up with their ship, and then he disguises himself as Luffy, has changed into Luffy, and the others are mimicking the other Straw Hats. And they are essentially using themselves as a decoy to allow Luffy and the others the chance to escape, but also allow them to give the goodbye to Vivi, with the X marks and everything, so they're able to do that. And so that's kind of because of him. But he does this great, one of his speeches is one may stray from the path of a man, one may stray from the path of woman, from a woman, but there is no straying from the path of a human. Hence the shirt. And it's just like, that's his Okama way and everything. That's like his kind of motto. So the Straw Hats managed to escape because of him. And then from there, he gets kind of chased a little bit by the Marines, and then he does get captured by Hina. And then we get to the Miss Golden Week's Operation Meet Baroque Works, the cover page series. Some point in time during this series, Bon Clay has managed to escape. We see that his bounty is 32 million. He has managed to escape Hina, and he is trying to figure out what to do, and he ends up coming across Mr. 3, because Mr. 3 is trying to escape without helping any of the other members of Baroque Works. So Mr. 2 is like, yeah, that's not happening, and he's not in his ballerina outfit, and he's appearing a little more masculine right now, probably because he's kind of trying to hide. Good luck with that. And what ends up happening is he copies Mr. 3, pretends to be Mr. 3, pretends to hand himself in to the Marines, so that way he can act as essentially he can challenge Hina to a battle, to a rematch, which gives Mr. 5 and Miss Golden Week the chance to save Miss Valentine from Hina's clutches, and that allows them to escape. And of course, they cause the breakout of a bunch of the other Baroque Works members and such. And then of course, Mr. 2 is captured, as is Mr. 3, and they are thrown into jail along with Crocodile and Das Bones. And of course, they are eventually sent to Impel Down, where of course we get caught up with them later. Then we get to Impel Down. Now, of course, Luffy is in Impel Down trying to fight his way through the representation of hell, in order to try to get to Ace to try to save his brother, so he's not going to be taken for execution. Mr. 2 has been here for a little while. He is put in level 3 of Impel Down. I believe that is the starvation section of it, the kind of famine starvation area, kind of desert area. And he is keeping his spirits up nice and high. Also, his bounty, I guess, got up to 50 million. Or no, it's despite having a bounty far lower than that, he's put there probably because of his threat level of being able to copy people. But he apparently got to keep his makeup, which is fun. And he is, trying to keep his spirits nice and high. And him and a bunch of the other cellmates of his, he's doing like a bunch of the ballet classes with them, which is just kind of funny. When Buggy and Galdino show up, and Buggy and Mr. 3 show up, and Galdino instantly recognizes him. You are very impatient. My mom just got back from like a week-long trip last night, and he's like, okay, I want to see Grandma again. Like, Grandma is fine. She is sleeping. And what ends up happening is, like, they recognize each other, and they end up kind of finding out that, oh, Luffy is here. Like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm here Straw Hat Luffy is here. He's trying to save his brother, and I kind of got dragged into helping him. Luffy's here. Straw Boy is here. So Bon Clay is very happy to hear that. They end up, he gets, let out of his cell, and he ends up making his way to where Luffy is. And Buggy lets him out of the cell because he thinks that Luffy and Bantam, that Bon Clay will work better as scapegoats together than him and Galdino while they're trying to, cause like a little breakup. So he ends up making his way to where he finds where Luffy is and ends up teaming up with Luffy in order to fight against the blue gory, the blue gorilla things that are in Impel Down. So we get like some nice bits of them fighting together and everything. He also, he disguises himself as Zoro's one time, and then, Luffy and him are just so happy to be reunited, which is just fun. It's for Luffy at seeing a friendly face in this area. To be fair, Luffy has had Buggy run around with him for a little bit, too, so, yeah. So, they're going through all of this, and Luffy's like, okay, well, I gotta get down to level 5, because that's where Ace is, and he's like, and Mr. 2 mentions that there's someone that he had wanted to see anyway, and that was Emporio Ivankov, Queen of Kamabaka Kingdom, and the idol of Okamas worldwide. Gee, I wonder why. So of course they end up fighting through the Blue Gory, and then eventually they end up fighting Minotauros, and Mr. Buggy and Mr. 3 show back up again, and the 4 of them end up having to fight against stuff together. And they end up running around a bunch and having to fight against some of the other various other things that are around in Impel Down. And from there, it ends up being that they eventually end up running into, of course, Magellan. During this time frame, they've managed to get down from level 3 to level 4, which is, of course, the Boiling Hell, the Boiling Blood area, where, of course, we do see Mr. 1, Dad's Bones is there. And eventually we get it to where Magellan shows up. And Magellan is this thing that just puts this huge, this giant, covered in poison wall between them. And it results in, of course, Luffy is trying to fight Magellan, but unfortunately, because Magellan is, of course, poison-based devil fruit, I think it's the Doku no Mi, the poison fruit or whatever. He ends up, of course, being able to use that ability, and that is something that Luffy can't really fight through at this point in time. If Luffy had Haki at this point in time, he probably would have been able to put up a much better defense against Magellan. But that's not what's going on here. Luffy doesn't have that ability to help him here. I believe Mr. 3 does use his wax a little bit here, but that becomes a much more prominent thing later for the rematch with Magellan. So Luffy is trying to fight Magellan, and Mr. 2 actually ends up running off because he's so scared of Magellan. Fair. I'm not going to argue with you there, Bon Clay. I'm not going to argue with you there on that. But what ends up happening is, Luffy is fighting against Magellan, and he ends up getting very badly poisoned. And of course, Mr. 2 is just I can't watch this. So he ends up, he is retreated from the battle, but he feels so sorry for abandoning Luffy, that he knows it is wiser to survive and fight another day. So he does use this. He ends up, after Luffy has been just poison drenched and is on the brink of death and imprisoned on the level below the freezing hell, which is, I think, actually, I don't remember, because it's the first one is the spiky hell, the second level 2 is that, so it's the sifts around. What ends up happening is that Bon Clay has decided that he is going to try to do his damnedest to try to help Luffy. Because Luffy has been poisoned by Magellan and he is dying. So he essentially tricks Hannibal by disguising as Nami, tricks Hannibal, ties him up, copies him, pretends to be Hannibal, steals his clothes, gets a hold of Buggy and Buggy and Galdino, And he goes and he tries to find out if there is any antidote for Magellan's poison. And the people in the essentially the medicine area are like, why would we have an antidote if he's poisoned one of the prisoners? I don't know, as backup in case it accidentally hits one of the employees? Why the else wouldn't you have one? And also, even if we did have one, why would we give it to one of the prisoners? So he can't get that. So he's like, okay, I guess I know what I have to do. So Luffy has been put down into the freezing hell, and Bon Clay, disguised as Hannibal, along with Buggy and Galdino, end up going into level 5. He also ends up asking what information they have on Ivankov, and he finds out that Ivankov has been quote-unquote demoned away, that Ivankov just vanished at one point in time, and they have no idea where they are. They're going through level 5. Mr. 2 has shed the disguise of Hannibal, has gotten a hold of Luffy, and now he's just essentially going through level 5 with Luffy on like this little sled thing that he's carrying him in. As like Luffy is like dying while all of this is happening, and he is just like, we are friends. There's no need for any other reasons in regards to helping Luffy. So he is trying to help Luffy. They end up getting separated from Buggy and Galdino, which is not saying much. And then they end up getting attacked by like the hungry beast, by like the wolves that are down there. And of course, Bon Clay is trying to fight against the wolves. Luffy kind of wakes up enough that he is able to attack the wolves to get them to go away, and he unleashes a burst of Conqueror's Haki, which of course sends the wolves away. Unfortunately, they end up passing out. Thankfully, what ends up happening is they end up getting found by Inazuma. Inazuma shows up and is, they are just passed out, freezing to death in the freezing hell. And Inazuma just happens to show up. To be fair, we learn that Ivankov and the rest of New Kama Land in level 5.5 have been kind of like watching what's been going on with kind of the prison break on the monitors, and they have been very entertained by it. So they're like, okay, yeah, go find them. So they bring, Inazuma brings Luffy and Bon Clay back to level 5.5, and Bon Clay finds about this later, but Luffy wakes up enough to ask them to help his friend, to ask Ivankov and Inazuma to help Bon Clay before even helping Luffy. And we have seen this before. This is just the way that Luffy is. Did the same thing in Drum Island when he was asking Kurei Chopper to help Sanji and Nami, even though Luffy's hands and feet were bloody and scraped raw from having climbed the Drum Rocky to get to the castle. So this is just the way that it is. He always puts his friends, their priority, their safety, their health before his own. Is the way that Luffy works. And of course, this is enough that, Ivankov is like, okay. So they give, of course, Mr. 2, they give Bon Clay, medical treatment. And then, of course, he eventually wakes up and he finds himself heavily bandaged. And he ends up making his way out to where he sees like this gleeful, cheering crowd just like drinking and eating and having a good time. And he's like, am I dead? What the heck happened? Where the heck am I? And he sees on stage, he sees Ivankov, who is putting on, like the show and everything else like that. And he like realizes, oh my god, you're Emporio Ivankov. Thank God I found you, type of a thing. And like I think he actually worries that they're dead, and that they're like some type of like New Kama heaven or whatever. But he gets explained to him that no, he ends up getting shocked, and then he realizes, okay, where is Luffy? Where is Luffy? And Inazuma and Ivankov essentially explain what had happened, that they had found them in the freezing hell and brought them here, and because of Luffy's blah blah blah, Luffy asked for us to help you. Also, we have it that, like, the big burly prisoner, I think it's, like, Billet, shows up, tries to attack Ivankov, and then gets changed into a woman right before, in, like, a matter of seconds. And then, runs off. So, you're kind of stuck that way now, dude. So, we get that. What ends up happening is, of course, this, of course, reveals about Ivankov's power, the Horu no Mi, for the hormone fruit. And essentially, Mr. 2 gets to explain to him that, well, he begs Ivankov to help Luffy, and of course, Ivankov's like, well, I can't do that. Why not? Well, I'm already helping him. He's in this room over here where I've already kind of dosed him up with a lot of hormones. And stuff in order to try to help him. And there's not much that I can do now. It's all up to him. So what ends up happening is they go over to the room and he looks inside and, like, Luffy is just in so much pain as his body is fighting through the poison with Ivankov's help. And it's like Ivankov's powers can only do so much in trying to help Luffy. It also has to come from Luffy fighting for what he wants to do. And of course, Luffy at this point in time wants to save his brother. So this, of course, results in, he's very happy that Ivankov is helping Luffy, but, and I think he gets the rest of, like, he does a little bit other of explaining it, but I think Ivankov already learned from Luffy that he was there trying to save Ace and everything, and, like, if Luffy doesn't, get healed fast enough, he's gonna be late to try to save, Ace from the execution, because there's only so many hours left before that's going to happen, before they move Ace out of Impel Down. So he is just deeply disturbed by the suffering that Luffy is having to go through alone, and he wants to help, but he can't go into the room. So he ends up, at the door of the room, like, just screaming at Luffy and encouraging Luffy. And eventually this ends up bringing in, this brings in so many of, like, his passion and dedication to trying to cheer Luffy on, bring in the rest of the newcomers, and they start cheering Luffy on as well and everything. And you gotta think, looking back on it, this has to be some, like, type of, it's like, don't know how much Oda had planned for Luffy to be the sun god at this point in time. Might have already had that idea, but, like, you gotta kind of wonder if that's maybe something there of, like, Luffy's devil fruit powers kind of forcing their way through to try to help in regards to expelling the poison and helping him fight back. Something to do, like, the godly abilities kind of helping a little bit with that, with being, cheered on by the people who believe in him, by someone who believes in them leading them, type of thing. You gotta kind of think about that. You gotta think about that. I like that idea. But what ends up happening is, of course, Luffy endures through this hellish torture of, getting better, and he survives. And, he wakes up, and of course he's just so hungry, and of course they just bring in so much food to get to him. And Ivankov has just been Mr. 2 has just been cheering and cheering and cheering and everything, and, like, this this dedicated friendship and devotion and everything have just, like, inspired the other newcomers. Very skeptical, and even Ivankov himself, in regards to joining the act of cheering him on. At this point in time, Ivankov does not know that Luffy is Dragon's son. That gets revealed a little bit later. So we get through that. And then Luffy wakes up, is feeling much better. They give him food. He has improved massively, but he's still not up to 100%, so he does end up having to get, like, another injection of, like, the tension hormones from Ivankov in order to help him fight. Mr. 2, unfortunately, has kind of collapsed from exhaustion from cheering Luffy on and everything after celebrating Luffy's recovery, much to Luffy's shock. Luffy, Ivankov, and Azuma, of course, make their way down to level 6, where they end up getting, where they find out that Ace has been already taken for transfer. Jinbei and Crocodile are there. Jinbei says he wants to help. Crocodile ends up getting dragged into helping to a degree. And so we go through all of that. During this time frame, we know that Blackbeard eventually arrives at the prison, and during like the standoff with Blackbeard, Mr. Two does show up, and he's I think he's the one who explained. No, it's Crocodile that explains about the jailer beast being awakened zones and everything. I get it. You're annoyed at me. I'm sorry. And so eventually what ends up happening is, of course, Luffy kind of ends up having a rematch with Magellan, and of course, Buggy and Galdino, they're there, and Galdino is able to give him the wax, so he's able to fight against Magellan better than he did last time, because he can use the wax as a way of preventing himself from getting poisoned again. And of course, Mr. Two is there doing all of this, as is like Jinbei and, Crocodile have been dragged into this and everything for the breakout and everything. And it's Mr. Two that actually realizes that they need a way to get past the gates of justice. So he tells Jinbei, and I think Ivankov, that, because like there's like the last moment that he actually gets with Luffy where they are together, he tells Luffy that he needs to focus on getting out. Forget about Blackbeard. That's not something you need to worry about right now. Forget about Magellan, because like Magellan, Ivankov, and Inazuma are like dealing with Magellan at that point in time, to give the others time to get like the ships or whatever that they need in order to escape and to get through the doors. So that's what's going on there. They're trying to buy time. Luffy wants to go back and help them, and Mr. Two is just like, no, you have to keep going. All of this is for you to try to save your brother. Luffy doesn't want them to die. They just helped him in a ton of ways. But he was like, okay, fine. So that's where, that's kind of the last time that they end up talking. Bunkley kind of tells Jinbei, okay, I'm going to go and work on getting... Are you just standing in the corner staring at me? I love you. I am almost done. I have to get through an emotional speech by a dragged swan. Come here. Come here. I can pet you while I talk. I can do that. You know that, right? I can pet you while I talk. So what ends up happening is, of course, Bone Clay is like, okay, someone has to do something to get us past the gates, to get the gates open, gates of justice open. So he, disguised as Magellan, because he ended up, copying Magellan's face at one point in time, makes his way to the control room, pretending to be Magellan, somehow got a hold of Magellan's clothes, is pretending to be Magellan, and is ordering them to open the gates of justice. Once they are all on the ships and escaping, Luffy realizes that my mom just woke up, so you might hear something in the background. I hope not, but we'll see what's going on. So Luffy realizes that Mr. Two is not with them as they are on the ship. So he's like trying to figure out where he is, and Jinbei ends up pulling out the baby Denden Mushi and explains what Bantam did. And of course, they're calling the Denden Mushi that Bantam has with him. And, this is happening while Magellan has showed up and is like, that's not me. That's the imposter. And like, he changes back into himself, and we get like the great scene of Luffy and Mr. Two getting to say goodbye to each other while, Mr. Two is getting ready to face down Magellan. And, Luffy is just like, you keep sacrificing yourself for me. Why do you keep doing that? Stop doing that. And Luffy is just like, Mr. Two is trying to stay stoic and quiet and everything. And it doesn't work. And he ends up, blubbering about, you go save your brother and everything else like that. And, so. And like Luffy and the Okamas, or the Newcomas, and a bunch of the other prisoners, because they realize what happened. And like, I think Buggy and Mr. 3 are also just all bawling their eyes out. And like, this is also being kind of broadcasted. So I think some of the Marines hear it too, and they kind of cry, which was just kind of funny. But, as Mr. 2 is saying goodbye to Luffy over the Denden Mushi. And we get like kind of the last bit that's kind of like his thoughts as the gates of justice are closing. And it's like, the flower of friendship can bloom even in hell. Now the petals of that flower will be scattered upon the rolling bosom of the sea. One day I will make that flower bloom again. Oh, come my way. And, and that's, kind of Mr. Two's kind of last kind of thoughts as he is getting ready to face down Magellan as the gates of justice closed. And he fought against Magellan, somehow managed to, and this is the last time that we see him for a long time. And he's showing no fear, and he is taking great pride in his actions and trying to allow Luffy and the others, to give Luffy and the others just this chance to escape. And for a long time, us readers and watchers kind of thought that Mr. Two had died at this moment, that he had died fighting against Magellan, got poisoned by Magellan. And we're just like, Mr. Two. And then we get to the Decks of the World cover page series, where Oda is catching everybody up on a bunch of stuff, and we get to the Impel Down section. And it is revealed that Bantam miraculously somehow survived fighting Magellan. Clearly wasn't poisoned, otherwise he would have very much been dead, because they don't have Ivankov there anymore. And to help fight back the poison. But he survives, and he ended up got brought back to, the New Kama land and Impel Down in 5.5, and he is now the new queen of the New Kama land in 5.5, and we see that in the cover page series. And that is the last canonical time that we have seen Mr. Two. Now, I know Mr. Two got a cover page picture very recently, just one of the fun, animal theater ones or whatever, that's him with some swans, and everybody's like, oh my god, this means that Mr. Two is alive. We've known he's been alive for over 10 years at this point in time. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? He's been alive for a while. We know that. We just haven't seen him in the manga for a long time, and we haven't seen him in the anime since Impel Down, because cover page series are not animated as they should be. So we don't know that yet. That is one thing that I hope that the One Piece that the new animation actually does more is animate the cover page series. Works them in and animates them more. That would be nice to see. That would be fun. But what we end up, of course, this is the last time that we have seen Mr. Two. And so many people are like, okay, because we know that Ivankov's original reason for being in Impel Down was to kind of wait to essentially have a prison break at one point in time. And that kind of ended up happening earlier than planned, because, of course, Ivankov found out that Luffy was Dragon's son, so Ivankov thought that, Ace was also Dragon's son and was willing to help Luffy and everything else like that. But it's kind of the question of okay, when are we going to see Mr. Two again? We know that there are other people that have been thrown in Impel Down since then. We know that is where Dofi is, and where a bunch of the other members of the Don Quixote family are. And is he planning on doing another breakout at one point in time? Is it possible that Magellan might do something in being against the world government because of what was revealed because of Vegapunk? They could have very easily showed, that would have been something that I would have liked that they would have showed in Impel Down, would have been go to 5.5 and see, the Okamas, the new Kamas just reacting to Vegapunk's message. That would have been a very interesting way of doing it. And have Mr. Two there and be oh no, Straw Boy type of thing, with the news about what was going on, because they get information in 5.5, they're able to get they get food and they get other supplies, and they're able to get newspapers and stuff like that, so they stay fairly well informed. And that he would have been so happy every time Luffy got a new bounty poster, so happy. He would have been devastated for Luffy with what happened at Marineford with losing Ace and everything else like that. He would have been devastated by that, but then he would have been so happy with okay, no, Luffy's alive, and then Straw Hat's returning 2 years later, and then every time Luffy's bounty went up, and Luffy fought against Yonko. Oh my god, Luffy beat another warlord. Luffy fought against Yonko. Luffy defeated 2 Yonko. Luffy is a Yonko now. He would have been so happy for Luffy with that. And so many are well, if Mr. Two shows back up again, we want that to happen. We want there to be a breakout of Impel Down. And maybe that results in like Dofi kind of being on our side, the way that like Crocodile kind of was, with breaking out of Impel Down the first time. So we'll see what happens there. I do want to see Mr. 2 again. He is a very fun character. This video ended up being longer than I anticipated, but chip. So that's what I have. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.